John woke up on a spaceship going to Titan, feeling weak and confused. Strange things happened, like damage to the ship, fights with the crew, and odd voices. As they neared Jupiter, John felt more worried. He didn't know if he could trust the captain or if something was really wrong. Keep watching to know what happened next. The spaceship was on a mission to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Astronaut John woke up in the hibernation capsule. He felt weak after the long sleep. The drugs had many side effects, and John needed some time to recover. He was greeted by the ship's captain, Franks. The captain ordered John to take a shower and come up to the bridge to talk about the next steps. Along with Captain Franks, John met his colleague Nash. Together, they watched a message from the Mission Control Center and received new instructions. They were supposed to conduct routine equipment checks and prepare for gravitational acceleration. John tried to pull himself together, but this time he felt worse. He struggled to eat and told Nash that he couldn't remember Zoe's last name, his girlfriend. By evening, John managed to check all the equipment. He recorded a response message to Mission Control, reported the situation, and prepared for another hibernation cycle, which would last 3 more months. A special substance was injected into his bloodstream, and his eyes slowly closed. Memories from the past flooded his mind as he fell into a deep sleep for 3 months. The awakening process was routine, with John going through the usual symptoms as he waited for his body to recover. After a good meal, the astronaut spent time on the exercise bike, preparing for work. Unexpectedly, he heard a familiar voice. It seemed like Zoe's voice came from nearby. John stepped into the corridor and walked through the empty spaceship. No one else had woken up from deep sleep yet, and John felt uneasy. His fear grew when part of the ship's hull above him started coming loose. John tried to find out what was wrong, but a piece of metal broke off and knocked him unconscious. Captain Franks and Nash laid their injured colleague down and gave him medical assistance. Once John felt better, the captain ordered him to go to the technical compartment and find out what caused the problem. Under the hull, John found major damage and a strange large dent, but the footage Nash reviewed from the cameras gave no answers. No objects had come near the ship in the past few hours. The dent hadn't caused any major issues either, as all systems were still working fine. Captain Franks left his crew and ordered them to report the situation to Earth. He went to the damaged area for another inspection himself. Nash tried to convince the captain to stop the mission and return to Earth, but Franks refused to break the rules. Since all systems were still running well, he saw no strong reason to do so. The astronauts gathered to make a joint decision, but the disagreement only grew worse. Nash started to panic, insisting that continuing the mission was too dangerous, but the captain stood firm. Without new orders from Mission Control, they would keep heading toward Titan. Nash then tried to convince John to work with him. He believed the systems would eventually fail, and by then, they wouldn't have a chance to save themselves and return to Earth. Their conversation was cut short when the captain called them to the bridge. He admitted that he had overheard Nash's words and didn't appreciate him trying to cause panic. Franks tried to calm Nash down, reminding him of the serious consequences for not following orders and telling them to focus on their duties. Even after the captain's warning, Nash kept urging John. He asked John to set the hibernation cycle for 89 days instead of 90, so they could wake up earlier than the captain and turn the ship back to Earth. John didn't like Nash's idea and didn't want to be part of a mutiny. But when Nash told him about another ship that was destroyed because of poor leadership, John agreed to think about it and promised to give an answer after they woke up. John fell asleep again, remembering happy moments with Zoe. But this time, the sleep cycle was much shorter than usual. Nash demanded an answer from John so they could quickly turn the ship around and head back to Earth. However, John still wasn't sure. He realized his mind was unclear, and making big decisions in such a state wouldn't be wise. Jupiter appeared outside the window, making John's doubts grow stronger. They were so close to their destination, and this pushed Nash over the edge. A loud argument erupted between the two men. Captain Franks watched the whole situation unfold. After learning about his crew's plans, he had adjusted his own sleep schedule and woke up earlier to stop the mutiny from ruining the mission. Franks sent Nash to check the systems again to ensure everything was working properly. While Nash was gone, the captain invited John for a drink to get a sense of his mood. The commander reassured John that he would cancel the mission if necessary, but for now, they had to stick together and follow orders. Nash's failed plans drove him nearly insane. He caused a scene, and Franks decided to take away his duties and move forward with the acceleration without him. John tried to stay out of the fight and pretended everything was okay, but the breach in the hull kept haunting him, and he often had nightmares of being pulled into the vacuum of space. Despite his worries, John ignored Nash's desperate pleas and went to the bridge to prepare for acceleration. The team got ready to approach Jupiter. John set the coordinates and activated the powerful engines one by one, which would take them to Titan. The acceleration went smoothly, and the ship entered the orbit that would guide them toward Titan. However, Nash still believed they were making a big mistake. John wasn't entirely sure they made the right decision either, but he tried to stay busy to keep his mind off it. As he checked the equipment again, something unusual happened. One of the radios picked up an unknown signal. The crew tried to figure out what had happened, but both believed that John must have accidentally pressed a button. To end the argument, Captain Franks told the astronauts to get ready for another hibernation cycle. This time, waking up from hibernation became a serious struggle. John collapsed to the floor, completely exhausted. He tried to recover, and while his body slowly gained strength, his mind started to suffer. He began seeing visions of Zoe everywhere. Captain Franks noticed John's strange behavior and told him to get a grip, reminding him that it was all in his head. Zoe wasn't and couldn't be on the ship. Meanwhile, Nash discovered the first signs of trouble. The reactor's power output began to rise, and although he wasn't sure if it was related to the hull breach, he feared the ship's engine might fail if it continued. Nash once again begged John to listen to him and turn the ship around. He even mentioned Zoe, saying that if they didn't return to Earth soon, she would find a new boyfriend. Captain Franks overheard their conversation again and called them to the bridge for a serious talk. He revealed that someone had used Nash's password to lower the engine's power, trying to stop the ship. Franks had enough of Nash's actions and pulled out his sidearm to show who was in charge. Franks ordered the astronauts to return to their hibernation capsules to prevent any more sabotage. But as John's body started receiving the hibernation drug, he saw what the captain was doing to Nash. There wasn't enough time to stop the crime before his eyes closed. Weeks later, when the sleep cycle ended, John tried to figure out if what he saw was real or just a dream. He stepped into the corridor but found no sign of his colleagues. Suddenly, Captain Franks appeared and assured John that Nash was fine, but would stay in hibernation until the mission was completed. He asked John not to make things more difficult and to act normally. They needed to complete the mission and reach Titan, but Captain Franks made it clear that he would use his sidearm if anyone disobeyed again. To help John relax, Franks shared the truth about the other ships Nash had mentioned. He swore that Nash had twisted the facts and that in those cases the crew had harmed themselves, not because of the captain. John, though hesitant, admitted he had been wrong and agreed to continue working with Franks. The captain assigned him the task of inspecting the equipment and reconnecting with mission control on Earth. While John worked, his arm suddenly went numb. He tried to check it himself, but for a moment, it seemed like his arm was swelling and turning into a monstrous hand. As soon as the vision faded, John heard Zoe's voice again, but he realized it was just another hallucination, so he ignored it. Instead, he decided to talk to the captain about their next steps. However, Franks unexpectedly brought up John's relationship with his girlfriend. The captain claimed their romance wasn't real and had been staged to get John to join the mission. This unsettling conversation disturbed John, and he went to the workshop to focus on his tasks. As unpleasant thoughts clouded his mind, the radio suddenly crackled, and he heard the voice of the dispatcher. John tried to report what was happening, but the connection kept cutting out. Franks summoned him to the bridge, demanding to know what John had been doing. When John explained about the communication with Houston, Franks insisted it was just another hallucination. The captain then ordered John to return to his capsule and go back to sleep. But this time, John lost control. He demanded that Franks wake Nash up to prove he was okay. Taking advantage of a moment, Franks attacked John, trying to force him into the capsule. But John managed to break free, and a fight broke out between them. John was physically stronger, but he couldn't win the battle in his mind as easily as he could with the captain. John rushed to the central computer, desperate to find out which chamber Nash was in and if he was still alive. While entering the request, he had to fend off Franks. Finally, the computer began searching for Nash, but the answer left John shocked. The system confirmed that Nash was alive and on the bridge, just like John and Franks, because all three names referred to the same person, Captain John Franks Nash. John realized he had been alone on the ship all along. His companions were nothing more than hallucinations caused by repeated use of the hibernation drugs. Exhausted and unsure of what to do, John returned to the workshop, holding the service pistol. He tried to contact mission control again, but for a long time the radios remained silent. Finally, one radio came to life and John heard Zoe's voice. She told him she was at ground control and had been asked to speak with him. Zoe confirmed that the hibernation drugs had confused his mind. But that wasn't the worst part. She explained that there was no spaceship. He had been part of a different experiment, located deep underground. The planets and stars he saw were just a simulation, and the sense of flying wasn't real. However, an earthquake had struck the area, partially collapsing the tunnel. Zoe asked John to gather his strength and help them rescue him by depressurizing the cargo bay and leaving the ship. She assured him that there was an underground corridor leading to the surface. Just then, Captain Franks reappeared, trying to stop him. Franks claimed Zoe's voice was just another hallucination, and that her story about underground tunnels and earthquakes was a fantasy. He warned John that if he depressurized the cargo bay, the vacuum of space would pull him out and kill him. John hesitated briefly, but Zoe's voice gave him the courage to act. Ignoring the captain, he opened the airlock. At first it seemed Zoe was right. John found himself in a shaft and could hear her voice nearby. He walked toward the light, hoping to reach the surface soon. But space suddenly engulfed his body, carrying him into the infinite void.